At a family dinner, my parents casually mentioned that my sister would be moving in with me. I just let them talk. They had no idea I had already moved to a new apartment they knew nothing about. My name is Alex, and I'm 27 years old. If you ask my parents, they'd probably say I was the difficult one in the family. Not because I was rebellious or irresponsible, quite the opposite. I worked hard, paid my own bills, and kept my life in order. But in their eyes, that just made me the default problem solver, the one expected to give a little more whenever someone else in the family was struggling. And by someone else, I mean my older sister, Emily. Emily was 30, but you'd never guess it from the way she lived her life. She had never held a steady job for more than a few months, always had some excuse for why she couldn't pay rent, and somehow managed to convince my parents that none of it was her fault. She had a way of twisting every situation to make herself the victim. Her boss was always out to get her. Her roommates were toxic, and the job market was impossible. Meanwhile, she lived in a cycle of bouncing between my parents' house and whatever friend was naive enough to let her crash on their couch. I had learned early on that if I wanted a stable, peaceful life, I needed to keep my distance. It wasn't easy, though. My parents had a habit of roping me into her problems, usually with some kind of guilt trip about helping family or being lucky enough to have a good job. That's why I had worked so hard to set boundaries to make it clear that I wasn't her personal safety net. But as I would soon find out, my parents never really respected those boundaries. They just waited for the right moment to ignore them completely. It all came to a head at a family dinner. I should have seen the signs the moment I walked into my parents' house. My mom was being extra nice, my dad was unusually quiet, and Emily was barely looking at me. Something was up, but I had no idea just how bad it was going to be. Dinner started off normal enough with the usual small talk and my mom's passive-aggressive comments about how she never sees me anymore. I mostly just nodded along, focusing on my food and waiting for the night to be over. Then, just as I was starting to think I'd escape without too much drama, my mom set down her fork, folded her hands on the table, and hit me with it. "So, Alex," she said, in that overly sweet voice she used when she was about to say something I wouldn't like. "Your sister's going to be moving in with you for a little while." I almost choked on my food. The room went completely silent, like they were all waiting for me to just accept it and move on. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just sat there, staring at them, waiting for the rest of the explanation because there was always more. And sure enough, my mom kept going. "She's had a really rough time lately, and you have that nice place all to yourself," she continued, as if it was the most logical thing in the world. "It just makes sense. You can help her get back on her feet, and she won't be a burden on us, a burden on them. Because heaven forbid my parents actually tell Emily to take responsibility for her own life. No. That was my job, apparently, but I still didn't say anything. I just sat there, letting them talk, watching the whole situation unfold like a slow-motion car crash. "Yeah." My dad chimed in, finally deciding to contribute. "It's not like you can't afford it. And she really just needs a stable place to figure things out." That was when Emily finally decided to speak. "It'll only be for a few months," she said in a voice that sounded suspiciously rehearsed. "And, I can help out with stuff around the apartment too." That was a lie, and we all knew it. Emily didn't help out with anything. She barely even cleaned up after herself, but I still didn't react. I just nodded slightly like I was considering it because in reality, I was waiting. Waiting for them to finish their little speech. Waiting for them to really commit to this idea. Waiting for them to make the biggest mistake of all, assuming that I was actually going to go along with it. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for some kind of reaction, anger, frustration, resistance, but I didn't give them any of that. Instead, I exhaled slowly, set my fork down and nodded. "Okay," I said simply. For a moment, nobody spoke. My mom blinked like she hadn't expected me to agree so easily. My dad looked relieved as if he had been bracing for an argument. And Emily, well, Emily just smirked like she had won some kind of battle she hadn't even fought. "Really?" my mom asked, narrowing her eyes. "You're okay with this?" I shrugged, "Sure. If it helps Emily get back on her feet, I don't see why not." That was all it took. My parents instantly relaxed, and my mom launched into a whole speech about how proud she was of me for stepping up as a sibling. My dad nodded approvingly, and Emily, who had clearly been prepared to argue, just leaned back in her chair, looking smug. I could already see her wheels turning. She probably thought she had pulled off some kind of master manipulation, that I had caved just as she and my parents had planned. I could picture her mentally moving into my apartment, deciding which room she'd take over, imagining how she'd rearrange things to make herself comfortable. And why wouldn't she? She had gotten away with it before. When we were younger, she used to steal my clothes and act shocked when I got mad about it. When she was in college, she borrowed my laptop and conveniently forgot to give it back. When she got her first apartment and couldn't pay rent, she convinced our parents to pressure me into covering for her. Just this once, of course, except it never was. Emily wasn't just entitled. She was a professional at twisting reality, making herself look helpless, and making me look like the unreasonable one whenever I pushed back. But this time, she had no idea what was coming. So when's she moving in? I asked casually, taking another bite of food like this was just a normal conversation. My mom practically beamed. Oh, we figured this weekend. That way she can get settled in before she starts looking for work again. This weekend, perfect. Emily stretched her arms behind her head like she had just won the lottery. Yeah, I don't have that much stuff anyway. Mostly clothes, a few boxes. It won't take long to set up. I nodded again like this was all fine by me. Sounds good. Just let me know what time, and I'll be there. That part, at least, wasn't a lie. I would absolutely be there. Not at the apartment, of course, no. I'd be somewhere much better watching from a safe distance as Emily, my parents, and a car full of her stuff pulled up to my former apartment. The one I hadn't lived in for weeks. The one I had sold. The one that now belonged to an entirely new tenant who had no idea what was about to happen. And I wasn't going to stop them. Not yet. I was going to let them find out exactly what their little plan had gotten them into. The days leading up to that weekend felt like they dragged on forever. Every time I thought about what was about to happen, a grin tugged at the corners of my mouth, but I kept my cool around my parents. I didn't want them getting any suspicious vibes from me. Instead, I let the plan unfold exactly as I had imagined it, like a slow-moving train wreck, but with me on the sidelines, casually watching it all happen. Saturday came, and I spent the day out of the apartment doing things I had been putting off for weeks. It was perfect timing. My parents would show up at the apartment expecting to unload all of Emily's things, and they'd soon realize something had gone very, very wrong. Around noon, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, so I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, I heard my phone ring again, and this time, I decided to answer. Hello? I said, trying to sound as casual as possible. Alex, my mom's voice came through tight with frustration. What's going on? I could hear my dad's voice in the background, raising his tone as well. They weren't angry yet, just confused, disoriented, like they had walked into the wrong house or found themselves in a strange, unfamiliar situation. What do you mean? I asked, trying to sound innocent. We just got here. My mom continued, her voice cracking. What is this? The apartment's gone. The landlord says it was sold weeks ago, and there's a new tenant living here now. I couldn't help it. My lips curled into a smile. Oh, really? That's so weird. I didn't know anything about that, I replied, playing the part of the confused, completely uninvolved son. But, I guess I should have mentioned it sooner, my dad's voice cut in, sharp with frustration. What's going on, Alex? Why didn't you tell us? You promised Emily she could move in, and now we're stuck here with her stuff. It took everything in me not to burst out laughing. I could hear Emily in the background now, her voice growing louder, panicked, like she was trying to piece together the situation. It was music to my ears. Listen, I don't know what to tell you, I said, keeping my voice calm. I thought you guys were aware. I moved out a few weeks ago, sold the place. Didn't think I needed to mention it since, well, it wasn't really relevant to me anymore. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. What do you mean, sold the place? My mom sounded like she was trying to process the words. You sold your apartment? You didn't even tell us? Yeah, I said, taking my time with the words. It was kind of a last-minute thing, honestly. I guess I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. But, yeah, I moved out. New chapter and all that. My dad's voice rose in pitch. So what are we supposed to do now, Alex? You can't just drop something like that on us. Emily had plans, and we've already packed her things up. You don't think we deserve to know what's going on? I leaned back in my chair, trying to keep the smirk off my face. I was loving this. You know, I really did think you guys would know, I said, dragging it out. I guess I assumed you were in the loop. You know how I can be quiet, keeping to myself. Maybe I should have called you when I moved, but honestly, I didn't think it was that important. You didn't ask, and I didn't offer. The frustration was palpable on the other side of the phone. My mom's voice had that edge of helplessness now, like she had been completely blindsided. But you told us you were fine there. You said you were happy with your apartment. Yeah. I was. But I guess things change, I replied smoothly, adding just enough detachment to make it sound casual. I didn't really expect to give it away like that, but, well, the offer was too good to refuse. A heavy silence hung in the air for a moment, broken only by the distant sound of Emily grumbling in the background. My dad was the first to speak again, but his voice was trembling with anger now. Why didn't you tell us, Alex? He asked. His tone accusatory. You could have at least let us know. Now we're stuck in this mess, and Emily, I didn't let him finish. Look, Dad, you're acting like I did something wrong. I'm just living my life, and this was my decision. You know how things go with me. I do what works for me, and I don't check in with everyone else every step of the way. I mean, I'm not a kid anymore. My mom cut in before my dad could respond. So what are we supposed to do now? Are you going to fix this, or should we just drag Emily's stuff back home? I let the question hang in the air for a second before answering. Well, I said, pausing for effect, I guess that's up to you. You could always, figure it out on your own. I'm sure there's a nice couch somewhere for Emily to sleep on. There was another long silence. I could practically feel the tension through the phone. My mom's next words were barely audible, filled with a mix of disbelief and anger. This isn't fair, Alex. You're just going to leave us to deal with it. I sighed dramatically, leaning back even further in my chair. Look, I'm sorry. I guess I should have told you sooner, but, sometimes life just happens. You can't expect me to always be the one to pick up the pieces. Emily's voice broke through again, louder this time, a mix of frustration and panic. What is all this, Alex? I grinned. I don't know what you want me to say, and maybe you should have figured things out yourself before relying on other people to solve your problems. The sound of Emily muttering something under her breath made me grin even wider, but I wasn't done yet. I had them right where I wanted them. I was enjoying this way too much to let it go. Anyway, gotta run, I said casually, cutting the conversation short. Good luck with everything, though. I'm sure it'll work out. And with that, I hung up, my fingers still buzzing from the tension I just left behind. I didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. I spent the rest of my afternoon with a strange mixture of satisfaction and anticipation, letting the chaos I'd just unleashed simmer for a bit. I knew my parents weren't the type to just give up. They put up a front of confusion, sure, but that was only the first stage. Once they realized they were actually stuck, that's when the drama would really kick in. And Emily? Well, she would probably try to play the victim as usual, but I had no intention of letting them off the hook. Not this time. By the time I got back to my apartment, the sun had started to dip below the horizon, casting a soft orange glow over everything. I walked through the door of my apartment, locked it behind me, and settled into the couch to unwind. I was so calm. I didn't even feel guilty. This was payback. Simple, poetic revenge for all the times they took advantage of me, manipulated me, and made me feel like I was just a backup plan when things didn't go their way. Around an hour later, I heard a knock at the door. I was instantly alert. I checked the peephole. My heart skipped a beat. It was them. My parents, Emily, and, wait for it, her stuff. The car was parked out front. The trunk open with boxes and bags piled high, like some scene straight out of a bad sitcom. For a moment, I stood there, staring at them through the peephole, feeling a sick sort of glee. They had actually tracked me down. They had no idea I was living here now, though. That was the best part. They thought they were just showing up to the new place, my old place, but they were about to walk straight into a confrontation. I opened the door slowly, making sure I was calm, collected, and in control. Alex, my mom's voice came first, hesitant, almost pleading. We tried calling, but you didn't pick up. We managed to figure out where you were living now. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, did you? How'd you manage that? Never mind that. My dad cut in, sounding defensive. We need to talk. You need to make this right. You did say Emily could move in here, and now she's got her things. We don't have anywhere else to go. I leaned against the doorframe, casually crossing my arms over my chest. That's the thing, though, isn't it? I never said Emily could move in here. My dad's eyes widened, and I could tell his patience was running thin. Come on, Alex. Don't make this harder than it has to be. You can't just leave us hanging like this. We came all this way, and now you're just going to refuse to help your sister out? What kind of brother are you? Emily, standing just behind my parents, was glaring at me. I could almost see your mind trying to work through the situation, piecing it together in real time. This is ridiculous, Alex. You said you'd let me move in, and now you're acting like you don't even know who we are. We've been in your life long enough for you to be decent about this. Is that so? I said, holding back a smile. You really think you're entitled to just walk into my apartment like this is some kind of hotel? I could see the moment they realized they had made a massive mistake. The realization was slow, but it hit them like a ton of bricks. I was living here. This apartment was mine, my real home, and they had shown up with Emily's bags expecting a free ride. Emily's face flushed bright red with anger. What is this, Alex? You're really going to do this to me? After everything? I stayed quiet for a few beats, watching their expression shift from confusion to frustration and finally to embarrassment. This was the moment they realized they'd been played and the moment I decided to turn the screws even tighter. Look, I said, taking a step closer to them. I don't know how to put this any more clearly. This is my apartment. I didn't sell it. I didn't give it away. I'm not offering a free place for anyone, not anymore. I could tell my parents were trying to process what I was saying. My mom looked like she was about to argue, but she stopped herself. The idea that I, Alex, the one who was always pushed around, was now standing in the way was too much for her to take in. You lied to us, Alex, my dad growled. You lied about everything. You knew this would happen, and now you're just leaving us to deal with your sister's problems. I shrugged. I didn't lie. You just didn't ask the right questions. Emily stepped forward now, hands on her hips, glaring at me. You're not even a real brother. I'm family, Alex. You're just going to throw me out like this? What happened to being there for each other? I looked at her blankly. I'm not throwing you out, Em. I'm just not opening the door for you. The tension was thick in the air. It felt like the perfect storm was coming, and I was the calm before the chaos. I could hear Emily's voice rising, a blend of frustration and desperation. My dad was pacing, muttering under his breath. My mom was on the verge of a breakdown, her face flushed with anger. It was almost too easy. Then Emily snapped, Fine. If you won't let me in, we'll just have to make you. My heart skipped a beat as she stepped toward the door. For a brief moment, I thought she might actually try to force her way in, but that was the point when I decided I'd had enough. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and pulled my phone from my pocket. I didn't say a word. I simply dialed the police. Hello? I said, keeping my voice steady and calm. I need to report trespassing. My parents and Emily stopped dead in their tracks, their faces going pale as they realized what I was doing. I didn't take my eyes off them as I spoke to the operator, calmly explaining the situation. I've asked my family to leave, I said, keeping my voice even, but they're refusing. They're trying to move into my apartment without permission, and I feel unsafe. I glanced at Emily, watching her face twist with anger and disbelief. My mom had gone completely silent, and my dad looked like he was trying to figure out how to save face. "This is going to end badly for you," Emily muttered, her voice venomous. I smiled a little, my voice steady. "We'll see about that, we'll see." As I ended the call with the operator, I felt the full weight of my decision settle in. The next step was out of my hands. It was time for them to face the consequences. The sound of a siren in the distance was the only warning I got before the police arrived. The family stood frozen, looking over at me with wide, anxious eyes as if they'd hoped I'd back down at the last second. But I didn't move an inch. I was beyond done. I had put up with their manipulative annex for years, and this was the moment I was finally going to reclaim my space, my peace, and my life. The officer who stepped out of the squad car was a tall woman with short cropped brown hair and a no-nonsense look on her face. She glanced at me first, then at my parents and Emily, who were now awkwardly shuffling on the doorstep. They looked like kids caught sneaking into a house they weren't supposed to be in. "Good evening," the officer greeted, her voice firm but polite. "I understand there's an issue here?" I nodded, my voice calm but with a sharp edge. "Yes, officer. These people," I gestured toward my parents and sister, "are trespassing. They showed up at my apartment expecting to move in without my permission. I've asked them to leave multiple times, and now I'm concerned that they might try to force their way in." The officer glanced at my parents and then at Emily. "Is this true?" she asked, her tone not unkind, but definitely direct. My parents hesitated. They clearly didn't want to admit they had miscalculated, but the truth was already on the table. Emily was the first to speak, her voice laced with frustration and denial. "He's lying," she snapped, her arms crossed defensively. "He invited me here. We came to move in like he said, and now he's trying to throw me out after everything I've done for him. I'm his sister. I deserve this." The officer didn't flinch at her outburst. "Ma'am, if Mr. Alex